guys, welcome to Better Tech. It's great to talk to tech strategists like yourself. So why don't we have your introduction first for our audience, and then we'll dive right into the topic.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. So I am Russ Felker. I'm the CTO at GlobalTranz. Actually, we just went through a merger with another large transportation company, Worldwide Express. So now I'm the CTO at the kind of combined entity of GlobalTranz and Worldwide Express. We are one of the nation's largest third-party logistics firms, tech-focused, tech-centered, and tech-based. So we are very much a technology-first company working across supply chain and logistics with a host of shippers and carriers. And we're some of those people that help to get goods from one part of the country to another and make sure that all of our shelves are stocked and that everybody can get their stuff, which has, of course, become a pretty big issue over the last year.
Right. So, Russ, since the invention of the printing press, people have always panicked about the implications of new technologies. Is there something uniquely worrisome about the nature of technological change today?
You know, one of the things that I think at least I always get concerned about is a focus on technology replacing people, when really the focus needs to be on technology enhancing people's ability to interact with each other. And that's one of the things that, while technology is great and chatbots are nice and all the other types of technology that you might interact with on a daily basis, nothing is going to replace a person-to-person interaction in many situations. And if technology can enhance those interactions, it tends to lead to a much better outcome for everyone. And I worry sometimes that technology takes the path of replacing the human interaction instead of augmenting it. And that's where I think efficiency can get put forward a little too much over and above experience for people.
So how different is the pace of technological change today compared to previous eras? And how do you think technology currently is re-engineering humanity?
Absolutely. The pace and this is something that people have said and resaid for a number of years, but the pace is constantly increasing. It's constantly getting faster. You have more technology coming out and more ways of quickly getting technology out. And unfortunately, sometimes what that leads to is the execution of technology without the thought behind the impact of that technology or of that piece of technology. So it's different in that it's much faster, and that I think the other thing that's affecting pace is that there have been a lot of inventions over the last decade, especially, and improvements on inventions that happened even in that previous decade over the last 10 years that have allowed more people to drive technology change and to introduce technology and to kind of create these digital processes and these digital offerings. So I think there's a couple of re-engineerings that's happening. One, you've got more people who can be creators, which is a good thing in that you've got better perspectives and you have better diversity of people that are able to create technology.
Right.
But it also has kind of driven a bit of well, let me just get this done and get this out here without necessarily putting the requisite amount of thought and understanding of potential impacts behind a technology you might be putting out into the world. And there's a lot of different types of technology across a lot of different things, but there are impacts to everything that we do in technology. And there's a lot of things you could point to from I'll call it a negative, or at least I think many people perceive it as negative, with shortening of attention spans and things like that technology is enabling. But things like some of the social media platforms and things like that have what I would consider unintended consequences that we don't necessarily think through fully before putting something out there. And that re-engineering of humanity has re-engineered us into this almost tech-first, society instead of person-first society. And I feel like we might have maybe lost a little politeness, a little ability to interact in a one-on-one basis, ability to see a person as a person with, good things and bad things about that person. And I feel like technology has contributed to that change in our societal behavior patterns.
You mentioned that the thought behind the implication of a certain technology is lacking, in your opinion. Could you just elaborate on that a little more?
Sure, absolutely. So, as you think about technology, people think about technology, I think, and they look at the newer technologies like phones and the latest things like that. But even you look at just kind of older traditional technologies like television and the ability to kind of deliver 24-hour news and get people wherever they need to be quickly, and focus on feedback loops from people that are watching, and instead of delivering maybe what people need to know, there's a lot more of delivery of what is perceived as what people want to hear about. And those can be very different in many cases. There's so that focus on being able to collect data and process data and churn through that to come up with essentially algorithms for programming and whatnot seems on the surface good, but in the end, it also starts to limit people's perspective and create less ability to see both sides of an issue. Because they might look at an audience for a particular channel and they might say, well, they want to hear this content, so we need to do more of this content, more of this content, more of this content. But might not be bad to have some other content that offsets that and helps to make people more well-rounded from a thought perspective.
And can you, if you talk about the flip side, can you mention some use cases from personal experience where you feel that technology has re-engineered humanity for good?
Absolutely. Look at what we just went through. And I think you can look at a positive benefit to technology. The ability to go through and create the vaccines that the world was able to do in such a short period of time. If you compare it to the last real kind of big vaccine push of something, polio is probably the one that comes to mind from the best parallel. That was decades in the making. And here we have months. It can be measured in months as opposed to decades. That's incredible. And that is in large part due to the technology that was able to be employed in the development of those vaccines. But even beyond just the development of the vaccines, which was a Herculean effort and leveraged technology in such an awe-inspiring way, the delivery mechanisms and the ability to get that vaccine distributed, not perfect. If you look at there are still disparities of where vaccines were able to get and where they weren't able to get, and how we were able to do that. But if you look at just the supply chain component of that, and that was driven in huge part by technology backing that supply chain and being able to get those vaccines out, track them, get them where they need to go, and get them delivered to people. It's incredible to see that. And I think that type of the ability to leverage technology to have such a profound impact on an ongoing crisis is something that you can't it's just incredible.
Absolutely, can't argue with you there. So Russ, what is one area where you feel technology can do wonders, but it is currently being underutilized?
So I think there's still a lot of technology that we use, but only in small areas. So we talked about getting the vaccines out, and I mentioned that it wasn't perfect in that there were not ways to understand the distribution of the vaccines and make sure that we were able to use every vaccine that was made, and that we were able to use it in a way that protected our most vulnerable populations across the world. There's still opportunity there. The interconnectivity of systems and the ability to move information back and forth and churn through that data can be used to have a much broader impact of these types of initiatives and efforts. And that is an area where I still think we're not quite there yet. Another one I think that's been it's underutilized now because of just the focus of where it's been put. But if you look at some of the self-driving technology, and this is really AI, being used to interpret, all the different pieces of information coming in from the vehicle, there's a lot of focus on, well, how do I get that onto, for example, a US highway?
Right.
Or in a city? But that's probably not the biggest impact place for something like that. If I could have that self-driving vehicle in a much more dangerous place, maybe it's a war zone, or anywhere that's dangerous for a human driver to be, where you by definition are going to have lower population, you're going to have some other extraneous circumstances, of course, but that would be an amazing place to be able to use that type of technology and save lives by doing so. So I think sometimes it's not that the technology itself is underutilized, it's just that the focus of the use of the technology doesn't enable its broader use.
Makes sense. And in today's digital age, do you think that it's possible to live free of these digital technologies and algorithms that track and influence us? If not, do you think that can we really be free then?
Yeah, I mean that's a big question. But I don't know that if you are a part of current society and you want to be a part of current society, you can be totally independent of many of these technologies. The one thing I'll say is that I am not on Instagram or any of these other platforms. I know of them though, so I guess in that way I'm involved with them in that fashion. But the way that you use those technologies and the way that you employ them can be different than what society not dictates but has fallen into as a pattern of usage. So you can still be on Facebook and I'm making myself sound extraordinarily old because I'm bringing up Facebook, but you can still be on Facebook, but you can do so in such a way that enables, or again, I'll go back to what I first said, supports your interaction with individuals, as opposed to being more in that performance society, bubble, where everything's kind of a performance, and you're performing for people that you really don't know. You're not really establishing relationships with people. You're just putting out content, and so I think you have to be involved, but the way that you're involved can be different. And that choice, which everybody has, is, I think, what still enables freedom, even with the ubiquity of technology. People can still be free, even when there is a ubiquity of technology. And you may be referring more to tracking, but you can still be free even if somebody knows where you are. I tend to know where my kids are, but that doesn't mean I'm controlling their decisions. Unfortunately, I wish I could sometimes, but that's not something I can do. So Um, and when you think about influence, well, influence again is just it's just an input into choice. It is not a prescription of choice. And so I feel influence is something that's always going to be there and always has been there, whether it was local or whether it's more ubiquitous like it is now. But it still boils down to individual choice.
So essentially, like even in today's digital age, technology is not a defining part of our lives. We have like freedom of choice is still there.
It's still there. I think you can make the choice for it to be a defining part of your life. That is a choice you can make, and I think you can look not very far and find people who have made that choice. But you can make the other choice too. And you can still do just fine in society.
Speaking of the other side, what technological developments do you think have the potential to do the greatest harm to our species and to our way of life?
As far as harm goes, there's obviously different degrees of harm. I think there's a mental harm that is inherent a little bit in the performance culture that we live in with some of the apps we were just talking about. That feeling of always needing to be producing content, being on display, is not something everybody can handle. And it has produced mental issues. There's also information overload, just being overwhelmed by the amount of information that can be accessed and that can be thrown at somebody. That has, I think you see rising rates of anxiety, rising rates of depression, and those can be attributed to the technological opportunities that are out there. But again, choice, have to make as I tell my kids when they go out, make good choices. And you have to make the choice that's good for you. So make good choices is not some like universal truth. It's, you have to make the choice that's going to affect you. So while I think there are very harmful aspects of today's technology, there are also, again, going back to the freedom question, you have the freedom to not buy into that and to not go down that path. I think we are, I'll say, reaping the rewards of our investment in global warming. Rewards is probably the improper term. We're reaping the issues associated with global warming from our investment in fossil fuels and things, and consistent industrialization, and while there are benefits to that, it's just even the weather patterns over the last couple of years, you can see the impacts and the harm that does. And I think that's one of the largest problems facing our society. And a lot of that has to do with the invention and proliferation of technology.
And that's very unfortunate.
Yes.
So we're just coming to the end of our episode. But before that, what are some questions we should be asking ourselves now about technology and human nature and the future?
I think I'll go back. My single question I would want anybody to ask themselves as they are developing a technology, as they're looking to buy a technology, as they're looking to adopt a technology within a company, within your personal life, how does this help me to connect with my fellow people that are around me? And while technology has enabled those connections in the last year when we were not able to physically see each other, they, and then definitely without the technology that we had today, I think it would have been a lot more of the anxiety and depression and whatnot that came from the isolation imposed by the pandemic. But as you go forward, technologies can enhance your ability to connect with people. Everybody needs to ask themselves, how is this doing that? How is this serving that goal? Because if that has to be the goal of technology, is to join us together as people, not create separation or create isolation in using or having this technology.
Lastly, Russ, what is one trend that you're most excited about regarding these technological developments?
I think the biggest one I'm excited about, and this is a little, admittedly, maybe a little centric to the business I work in, but I am extraordinarily excited about the technology being employed to make supply chains resilient. And I know that sounds very commercially and things like that, but supply chains provide medical equipment, medical devices, vaccines, all sorts of things that are critical to people being able to live, to be able to extend our lifespan and extend our quality of life in that extended lifespan. And the better we can get at having resilient and responsive supply chains to be able to deliver things where they need to go, when they need to be there, the better off we are as a society. And then the other one is just a number of there's a technology I actually just heard about, but it's a family of technologies that are helping to curb the carbon emissions that are right now a staple of our transportation infrastructure, and bring us into better balance with just the environment, and make us just a more green society, and hopefully allow for the one planet we got to recover and support us for a much longer period of time than we're on a path to now.
Right. And on that note, we come to the end of our episode. Thank you, Russ, for joining us on Better Tech.
Thanks so much.